Yeah, you can have an endless summer when you retire. Or according to this website, when you're at least 55 years of age. Yeah, that's the minimum age to buy a home in lovely latitude Margaritaville. This is part of a growing trend of adults-only communities. This is in Daytona Beach, Florida. There's also one in Watersound, Florida, and Hilton Head, South Carolina. It's an entire retirement community based upon Margaritaville and all of the salt life philosophies that the late artist, singer-songwriter, poet, pirate Jimmy Buffett espouses. You can move there and forever go fins up. Yeah, I'm kind of surprised with these planned communities. Normally, just with the housing market the way it is, are a lot more expensive than the ones that are available in Margaritaville. I was driving through this recent community this week. It was very eerie driving through this planned suburb way out there. I don't know why anybody would want to move out there. Unless, I guess it's like with these planned communities, you get everything that you want all in one place. You know, there's like usually general stores. Some of them have schools. They're all just like locally maintained. Like all the public services that you would get in like a normal city or a county or whatever. They're all locally maintained through like the property taxes that are collected from the expensive homes. And, the more or less affluent, somewhat generationally wealthy people who live there. So that's why they can afford to do all these things that it would normally take, right, like a city with a much larger populace to put into. But these homes in Margaritaville are like from the low 300,000s. Low HOA fees. I would suppose that you would probably pay a lot to the homeowners association. But yeah, this neighborhood I was going through to this week, where there were probably 200 houses in this little community. It looked like the neighborhood from Poltergeist or one of those early 80s like Spielberg suburb movies. Those homes are going for from like the 400,000s, right? And they didn't even have the benefit of having some kind of a celebrity endorsement or moving there to, take on the views of some late celebrity. It's just you pay $400,000 and you just, live in like a tiny little garden home out there. And the benefit is, I guess there's like no kids around or something. As you're 55 and up, you're an empty nester and it's time to get weird again. And here's like a whole YouTube series on it of people living their best lives in Margaritaville. And yeah, it's interesting. It's just like, it seems like it's these, baby boomers who are, aging up now, getting up there and wanting to embrace this lifestyle that they've always enjoyed. Again, like very much encapsulated in the work of Jimmy Buffett, this like laid back entrepreneur revolutionary, I suppose. These are the people who have been going to jobs their entire lives, but they get two weeks of vacation a year, so they go down to the beaches of Florida and South Carolina, and they hang out there in the sand, and they look out into the ocean, the vast expanse of the universe, and they're just like, what's it like to be an old pirate turning 50, right? These are the people who, on their long commutes in rush hour traffic down the interstates and the freeways of this country, they're driving their Mercedes Benzes and their Cadillacs, and they've got those bumper stickers on the back, those Salt Life bumper stickers, the flip-flops, right? The I'd rather be surfing, and very, very much encapsulated, I think, in that song that the Boys of Summer by Don Henley, right? Out on the road today, I saw a deadhead sticker on a Cadillac. I know I'm talking about like Jimmy Buffett here, but that's very much that idea of like these, these baby boomers, these people who were going to change the world, right? And they fell into the rat race just like every generation does, I suppose. And they made a lot of money at it, right? But they're still revolutionaries at heart, right? They're still pirates at heart, I suppose. This is the kind of generation now that like now that they've grown up and they've retired, and I suppose you could say perhaps maybe like cynically sold out. I guess they're now able to get back to the way that they dreamed about when they were young and starry-eyed and all that, right? I guess. Yeah, I saw this story this week. This was on Sunday morning. I wake up and I watch this show on CBS Sunday mornings. And there's Jane Pauley, and she's doing a whole story here about the what's it called again? Latitude Margaritaville. She does this whole story about it here.
Wasting away again in Margaritaville, searching for my lost sugar song.
We all know this beloved Jimmy Buffett tune, but as Martha Teichner saw firsthand, retirees living in real-life Margaritavilles are far from wasting away.
Jesus, so they like embrace it from because like if you hear some old person moves down to like a retirement community, then that's very pejorative, isn't it, to say that they're like wasting away? They're just like old people just waiting to die,
You'd think everybody drank the Kool-Aid before moving on to margaritas.
If I said Margaritaville,
playing pickleball,
Jimmy
of course,
Buffett,
not just
what
for the young.
immediately is the picture in your mind?
The beach, laid back, cool vibes.
It's a lot of fun. It's like a resort here.
It's actually Latitude Margaritaville, a 55-plus community in Daytona Beach, Florida.
Playing cornhole.
Well, first, it's 55 and better.
Tamara Baldanza Decker, Margaritaville's chief marketing officer, lives and breathes the brand.
This is Latitude Margaritaville, Daytona Beach.
Watching the sun bake.
Inspired by the tropical utopia the late Jimmy Buffett sang into existence and turned into a hospitality empire.
Oh my God.
From the street signs to the slogans plastered all over the place, to the
license to chill, right? There's like somebody with a sign in front of their house that says license to chill, like just this, this Margaritaville brand. I think it's okay. you know, I mean, Jimmy Buffett had some good songs, and you know, he's not the first artist to have like a whole philosophy that people adopt. That's certainly in a lot of ways the whole idea of art, right? The world is telling me to be one way, and I listen to this song, and now it makes me think of something completely different, right? Like entire movements have been spurred on because of, you know, one song that somebody heard, right? Like you know, that there's a song by Bob Dylan that has the lyric, you know, even the weatherman doesn't know which way the wind blows. And, you know, some 60s radicals heard it, and they started the Weather Underground and started like blowing up mailboxes and post offices and government buildings and things like that. Margaritaville, Jimmy Buffett, it's a little bit more chill, right? But yeah, just to like watch this story, there's clearly, you know, people here living their best life. There's a pet spa called Margaritaville, Latitude Margaritaville, fins up, right? They do this thing, right? Like where they, you know, they put the fins above their head to just show everybody that they're in on the joke, or maybe not a joke at all, but they, you know, it's like, it's a good way to just communicate with the people, with strangers, right? Just like go fins up, and you're like, I know, man, fins up, all right? It's just this, slogan with, a meaning baked into it that's whatever you want it to mean, I suppose. Right? There's right. It's just something that people have adopted over the years, you know. And when life gets rough, fins up, right? I suppose.
Or sales opened in 2018 and partied. The homes have sold as fast as they've been built. Only 4 are left. There are now nearly 855-plus active communities in the United States.
Oh.
The market is growing by more than 4% a year and is expected to top $800 billion by 2030.
My friends are gonna be there too.
Meet Jordan Statler.
Is that Highway to Hell?
72,
That's not a
divorced,
Jimmy.
a party-hardy latitudian since 2019. She prefers rock and roll to Jimmy Buffett. But take a look at her house. It's a shrine to the Margaritaville mindset.
There's friends, there's people, there's music, there's food, there's drinks. It was like, this is a built-in lifestyle.
Instant.
Yeah, like there was this trend that was going on a few years ago that I think a lot of young people embraced on things like TikTok, of the, I suppose, coastal grandmother, you know, just that old soul, that old woman who lives ideally near like a body of water, right? But she loves her margaritas, and her house, her kitchen is how would you say it, like very tropical themed, right? And she's got art all over the house, the pink flamingo kind of look, a golf cart parked in her driveway so that she could easily ride around the neighborhood, right? And everything. And yeah, these are these active adult communities, right? Active adult communities. So those people, I suppose, between like 55 and maybe 85, maybe a little bit older. I don't know, because our healthcare, our medicine keeps getting better. Our healthcare, maybe not so much, but people are living much, much longer, and they're having like these entire second lives after they retire. And so especially now with like the baby boomers, and then Gen X is very quickly, very soon going to follow in their footsteps. These are the people who have grown up with, pop culture, a very central part of their lives. These people who have grown up with work only being like one aspect of who they are, of their identity. So now they're growing up and essentially getting to live this lifestyle that they've, right, driven all of those long days down the interstates and down the freeways and worked in those tall office buildings and, you know, put those little bumper stickers on their car to kind of remind them that, like, you know, they're not really like this. And now they don't have to be like that, I suppose, anymore, right? So, yeah, more power to them. Fins up. It does make you want to, like, rewrite that song, right? Like Wasting Away in Margaritaville. Where's my salt? I can't remember where I put my damn salt. Some people say that there's a woman to blame. I know. It's Pelosi's fault. Speaking of wasting away, this is the Midnight Citizen Show. Thank you so much for joining me here tonight. I am your host, Mike Booty. Another night here in the South, Birmingham, Alabama. I'm online at mikesbonfire.substack.com. And until I hit the age of 55 and make at least $200,000 to put down a deposit, this is where I'll be. Yeah, on Earth. This is where we all are, on Earth. Forced to live together and get along somehow. Of course, not all of us are on Earth. This week will, of course, be marked as the historic moment, at least in the minds of some. You know, specifically the 6 women who went to space aboard the Blue Origin. I don't know what that was, like a phallic looking spaceship this week, thanks to Jeff Bezos, right? Yeah, this is these pictures of them, right? There's Katy Perry there, Jeff Bezos's wife, Gayle King. See, this is how I found out about this, was from watching CBS News, and this Gayle King is the anchor. You know, it's like, that's the thing is about like CBS. That's how I found that, Margaritaville story. Is that, I have like this, janky, little HD satellite thing. And, I pick up all these like weird channels. I mean, I guess that's what you do with cable, but I don't know. It's like some of them are streaming. I'm not really sure how that thing works, but the only local channel I get is like CBS. So it's like I turn it on to CBS in the mornings when I'm like, getting ready to go to work or whatever. And, it's like the CBS mornings. And I like to wake up in the morning and just catch up with a little bit of the news of the day, for better or worse, just to see what's going on in the world. But the thing about like CBS, one of the, I guess the oldest, right, broadcasting network in this country. It's a big advertisement, and they advertise basically anything. Like almost every story that they air is like, we have to let you know that, Paramount Plus is owns CBS or whatever. Like it's Yellowstone week. Yellowstone is on Paramount Plus, a subsidiary of, right? So, it's all marketing. So whatever. But this week, I think it was on Monday, they were advertising themselves, like Gayle King. I didn't even know about this, right? This is where we are right now in history, where like, somebody can go up into space and you don't know about it, I guess, unless something bad happens, right? Like, people are in space. They're trapped in space. They're not lost. We know exactly where they are. They're not lost in space. They're just hanging out in space, just waiting for somebody to come and get them. Right? Just waiting for the, waiting for your best friend to borrow his brother's spaceship so that he could, swing by and pick you up on his way to the 7-Eleven. You just don't really hear about people going to space anymore. And, that's because we have so many people doing it now. And we also have space has gone completely commercial. So every other day you hear about Jeff Bezos and, Blue Origin and SpaceX, and they're catching rockets and they're sending people up there. It's just not really that big of a deal anymore. So, but I find it interesting though, in 2025 that we are still doing, space things related, just for the sake of publicity. And that's what happened last weekend. Right. So, I guess they had this idea that, they were going to send, an all-women crew up into space. That would be cool. That would be a great moment, I think. But the thing about it is that none of the women, were scientists. None of them had any kind of expertise. None of them really did anything STEM related to to be up there. It was right. They were all the thing that they all had in common. Yes, they were women, but they were also celebrities, and some of them paid to be up there. Not all of them. They're not disclosing who paid to be up there, but I'm guessing that it was everybody in the photo op that they got up there, that we don't know. Right. So anybody who's now not, Gayle King or Katy Perry or, married to the owner of the spaceship, they probably had to pay. I think it's like $150,000 or something like that to go to space. Like, my God, man. They were treating this like it was like a big moment, I guess, for women. And it came across, I think, to pretty much everybody, right, as just being very tone deaf, right? Going up to space, all these rich and famous people on April 14th, the day before everybody on Earth is just like worried and fretting about their taxes and whether or not they're going to have enough money to pay taxes this year. They're having to watch all these people go up into space and not do anything and just like hover around the spaceship. I think they did more work when they were filming Apollo 13, the movie, right? When they went up in the vomit comet. These women just basically went up there and they just sort of hovered around a little bit. They looked at the moon, and were amazed to see the moon out the window, as if like they didn't expect to see that. Like, we can see the moon perfectly fine during the day from Earth, but they looked at it like it was like some kind of like a Martian, waving to them. Then they came down and they acted like it was just like some kind of just triumph. Like, there's Gayle King, stepping, off of the Blue Origin spacecraft, in her like blue, designer suit. And she's looking up at the clouds in wonder. It's like, oh my God, this is an amazing moment. And she gets off and she's just like, she kisses the ground. Okay. I want to like reiterate. She was on that spaceship. She was like in one part of West Texas. And then like a few minutes later, she was in another part of West Texas, and she gets down and she kisses the ground as if like, she, has been like just away at sea, unmoored and lost for years. Right. And Katy Perry says, like you never know how much love is in your heart until you're in space, which is like, okay, that's like a big F you to anybody on this planet. Right. Like, Mother Teresa never knew how much love she had in her heart because she never went to space. Right. It's just so easy. It's like, I think they may have done this as like a way to just like unify the entirety of humanity and just like making fun of these people. I think that may have been what it was. But I mean, yeah, it wasn't like any kind of major achievement or anything like that. It was just like, congratulations. You went on the world's tallest Six Flags ride. Good job. And, meanwhile, here on Earth, I did do my taxes this week and all that. I know, I'm a tax slacker, I guess. I'm a classic tax slacker. But, when you're like me and you don't have like one single job that you go to every day, just dreaming of that one day, right, when you can... you no longer have to advertise that you're a rebel in a suit, and you can just put on those flip-flops and lay back on the beach and read your mystery novels and listen to your entire Jimmy Buffett back catalog. Yeah, when you're like me and you just like work a bunch of jobs, you have a good reason to put off doing all your taxes because you get like a stack of W-2s that's about as high, comes up to your knee or whatever. And you just really don't want to do that. It's not fun, especially when you're like working every day. You get home and you're like, oh my God. But we sat down the other night, my wife and I, we got a bottle of wine and did our taxes, and knowing full well that this was going to be a bad year because like my wife and I, we both work several different jobs throughout the year. We really do scotch tape our income together at the end of every month and just see what we got there. And fully expecting this year to just pay a lot of money toward this government of the United States of America. And somehow, I don't know how it happened. I think like we got a refund. This is the first time in years that we got a tax refund. And we got one from the federal government and somehow the state as well. I have no idea because we live in like the cheapest state in the world. Like we live in, like Alabama. Is just like your homeless uncle, who has been just, comes around every April 15th and says that he's been clean. And just, if you can just give him a few bucks, that's what the state of Alabama is like. And you know that it's always going to be asking for money. And, somehow, I don't know, it gave us money this year. It just said like, no, really, I've been keeping clean. I've got a job. My buddy gave me a job down at the used bookstore and all that. Here's some money back. Right. I owe you this. Right. No, you got me out of the right. Yeah. That's the state of Alabama this year somehow. I don't know. And it's like next year, it's probably going to be back on the street. That relationship he had going with that girl probably fell through. So it's like next year, we're probably going to be owing him money again, but whatever. I don't know. Somehow we got a refund. Like we at the end of the night, my wife and I were seriously looking at the computer, going back through every one of our W-2s, every one of our deductions that we claimed. Of course, we got the standard deduction, and I deducted a lot of money for mileage because I drove a lot this year in my car for the various jobs that I had. And we were just looking at it and really trying to figure out, are we cheating the government by accident this year? It's like we were really paranoid. And even though we watch the news, I watch the news every day, and in between Gayle going to space and all the, marketing and interviews with the people on Yellowstone, they do tell us generally that the government is quite busy these days trying to keep afloat. And so we're sort of wondering that like the IRS may not notice, right? So there's that in the back of our mind. We're just kind of like, just go ahead and click file, just submit it, please, and let's just get this over with, and we'll find out later on if we cheated by accident. But and it did enter my mind because as we were doing our taxes, my wife had put on what has somehow become one of her favorite movies, The Wolf of Wall Street, which is a guy who cheats on his taxes, and we were wondering if maybe we were becoming infected by a little bit of Jordan Belfort's skis and schemes and all that stuff. But I don't know. I mean, we got a refund, so there's that. So we're patiently awaiting. Right. Our reformed uncle, Alabama, to come by and pay us back. Yeah, overall, that was a nice little relief. That was a nice little surprise. I needed like a little bit of good news, just a little bit of a boost. Yeah, because a couple of days before that, it was probably just as like Gayle King and Katy Perry were landing safely on terra firma. I got in a car wreck. I got in a car accident that I caused. The first car accident that I had caused since, God, probably I was in high school, I think. I was in high school last time I caused a car accident. And it's okay. Like, I mean, I'm okay. And the person who I hit is okay for now. I don't know. I think I may be getting extorted, or I may be about to get extorted. I don't know. Can anybody who has hit somebody before where everything seemed to be okay, like a year later, they come back and try to sue their insurance company and then you personally for neck injuries that suddenly came up? I don't know. Can anybody tell me, have you had this experience before? Because I've heard of it happening. And I'm afraid it's about to happen to me. So, yeah, this happened on Lakeshore Parkway down there in Homewood, Alabama, right across from the Walmart and the Catholic high school. And I was coming out onto the highway there and stopped at a red light, and you could turn right on red. And there was this car in front of me, this like Jeep. And I was watching what turned out to be a woman. I was watching this woman inch out into traffic, just waiting for the cars to pass her. And I was looking forward, and I clearly saw her go. And then I looked to my left just to be safe that no other cars were coming. And then I pulled forward as well. And then suddenly, like, there it is. It wasn't that loud. Honestly, it was like a tap. It nevertheless did like shake me up a little bit. I'm like, oh, I'm not used to that feeling, right? And I looked ahead of me, and there sure enough was this Jeep that I thought had gone ahead of me, and it had just stopped in the middle of it pulling out into traffic. The coast was clear, so she had stopped for some reason. I don't know why, but and yeah, the law, of course, like says that it's my fault, right? I shouldn't have hit her because I shouldn't have been so close behind her, I suppose. But I wasn't initially. She had just stopped while I went forward. She had started to pull forward when the coast was clear, and then, I was just checking my view, and I guess in the, that absolute millisecond lapse of me not having peripheral vision, that's when I like hit into her. And like I talked to a police officer later on, he's like, yeah, that's the most common kind of accident, that happens all the time. And so I was frankly, I wasn't really surprised that the woman pulled over. So it's like, I I follow her and she pulls over to the side of the road. I mean, because I did hit her, she felt it, I felt it. So it's like, it's only due diligence just to get out and check it, even though it's like, clearly there's no damage to either one of our cars. And, you know, and I pull over, you know, she goes over to the side of the road to the shoulder. I pull over to the shoulder and I get out. This is the first time I've been in a wreck. And, the last time I was in a wreck, somebody hit me, a drunk driver going about 70 miles an hour, you know, down the highway. I was like stopped at a red light and he just slammed into me at like 2 o'clock in the morning. This was, 13 years ago now when I think about, 13 years ago. And, he was, you know, he was drunk and, I was on my way to work and, that was when I was delivering newspapers and the police told me that the only reason that I was alive or wasn't seriously injured was because I had a trunk full of newspapers. Like they completely cushioned the impact of this guy. Right? So, but you know, that night when I got hit by that drunk driver many years ago, as shaken up as I was, I got out of the car and wasn't mad. I wasn't angry. I wasn't like upset really internally at all. I was just like thankful in that moment to be alive. And I was weirdly, you know, calm, and just like I was calm the other day. And I think I do this like for two reasons. I think number one is because I tend to have very self-destructive tendencies, right? Like when things are going really well, I do, you know, like tend to, feel like something around the corner is about to happen, something bad's about to happen. And this is always in the back of my mind when they're going really, really well. And finally, when that bad thing does happen, right? I'm oddly calm about it. I don't freak out. I think in a way because I've been mentally preparing for it. And so I'm almost like, there's almost like this sort of peace that comes over me when things get really, really bad. And, you know, and so like, yeah, obviously when you're in a car accident, that's just about like a really, you know, the worst that things can get for you because now, you've hit somebody or somebody's hit you and, you know, very commuter heavy culture. I live a very, a lifestyle that depends quite a lot on automotive transportation, and my car, when it's hit, that could seriously like affect things. But I'm calm, you know, when I hit the woman the other day and just like when I was hit years ago. And in both situations, I also am calm because in that moment, I am very aware of the idea of karma. I don't necessarily subscribe to karma, just like I was talking about last week. I don't necessarily subscribe to any kind of like, you know, specific religion or God or spiritual belief system. But I do believe that there is just an energy that you put out into the universe that, what the hell? Why not, you know, act as if it does exist, right? Because if it does exist, then you don't want to be on the bad side of it, right? So it's like, again, I think I call myself a skeptical agnostic or a cautious atheist, I guess, you know. And I do believe it's like, you know, when I got hit years ago, I got out of the car and I instantly went up to the driver to check and see if he was okay. My first words were from him were not like, how can you do that? What are you doing? Are you drunk? Do you have insurance? Like just barking at them, right? I go up to him and I just instantly be like, are you okay? Is there anything I can do? Do you want me to call the ambulance? Let me, you know, just stay there. I'll take care of this, right? That's what I said to the guy because he was, I mean, to be honest, like he was so incredible. He was like, you know, drunk and high. He really didn't know what had just happened at all. But I took care of it. Right. And like, just knowing that this could have easily been me, not saying that I would have been drunk and high, but but saying that like every single day we make a million stupid decisions when we're behind the wheel of our car. And, you know, we check our phones, we lose our peripheral vision when we like, you know, drink a cup of coffee. You know, this could easily happen to us at any given moment. It just happened to happen to somebody else, right? who hit you, and you're in the right and they're in the wrong. And the only difference is like, right, just like 1 little second. So it's like, I'm always aware of that. But, you know, the other day, it's like, I was hoping that my niceness, the generosity with which I treated the guy who almost killed me many years ago, would have paid off someday when I was on the other side of the accident, when it was indeed my fault. And I got out thinking that this was going to happen. That I was like, it's okay, she's going to be cool about this. She wasn't. She wasn't at all. Right. I got out of my car, and she gets out of her car, and she marches right up to me and starts pointing at me. And she's like, oh my God, there were cars coming. You didn't look, you didn't see. She gets really upset at me. And I was like, no, ma'am, I didn't see any cars coming. I'm really sorry. And she's like, well, you better call the police. And I was like, okay, I'll call the police. But I mean, honestly, and I looked at my car and I looked at her car, and there wasn't any damage at all. I couldn't believe it. There was absolutely no damage. I could have spit on her car and done more damage to it, you know, than there was initially. I wasn't going to do that, but it's like, I said to her, it's like, do you really need to call? I mean, I don't really see anything that we need to report here. There's no damage. And she's like, I know that, but my son's in the car and I've had all these back injuries. And I'm like, oh my God, no. And it's like, I have heard of this, right? I've heard of this, of course. And when she says that, I'm obviously like alarm bells go up, and, right. But I say, yes, ma'am, I will call the police. And she's like, you better. And so, and then she like, you know, starts to turn back and go toward her car. And before she like gets back and, you know, behind the wheel, she says, you better have insurance too. And I was like, yes, ma'am, I have insurance. I do. So it's like, you know, okay. So I'm there on the side of the road now. This woman is in her car, and call the police up and report the accident. And then they tell me, you know, like they asked me, do you need an ambulance? Is anybody hurt? And I was like, well, I'm not hurt, but let me just go check for a second. So I have to go over to the woman who's, as I said, sitting in her car behind the driver's seat, and she's got the window up, and she's in there, and like she's smoking a cigarette with the window up, and her son, who she was really really caring about and really concerned about that I had hurt him, is right there next to her. So she's smoking a cigarette, and she like rolls down the window and rolls her eyes at me, and she's like, what? And I say to her, do you need an ambulance? And she's like, yeah, damn right, I need an ambulance. I'm like, okay. So I, you know, and like I say into the phones, like, yes, ma'am, we need an ambulance. And they're like, okay, police and an ambulance are on their way. For now, just for your safety, put on your hazard lights and pull over to the side of the road. And I look back at my car, and my hazard lights are on, and my car is pulled way over to the side of the road, way over. It's actually at a bus stop, so there's plenty of room there on the side of the road. But then I look at her car, and I look at where I'm standing. I'm actually right out in the middle of the road with cars whizzing by me at about 70 miles an hour. And I say to the woman, it's like, ma'am, you may want to put on your hazards and just like, you know, pull further over to the side of the road. And she's like, God, whatever. So she like takes a puff of her cigarette, rolls her window up, and like does that then. So it's like, okay. So, you know, like for the next 5 minutes or so, I'm just kind of hanging out there waiting for the cops to show up. And sure enough, they do. And a police officer, a cruiser shows up. And then suddenly behind that is like a fire truck with like, it's like, you know, horns blaring, getting traffic out of the way. People are moving off to the side of the road for it. And it comes and parks behind the police cruiser. And then after that, another fire truck comes. But right, I don't want to be hyperbolic here. Like, honestly, it's one of those like pickup trucks that just has like fire insignia on it, I guess. So that fire truck comes, and the police officer comes, and he talks to me for a minute. Are you okay? Or do you need to get checked out? It's like, no, I'm fine. And then 4 paramedics come in behind him, and so they do all that. And you know, it's such a, I know I am laughing about it. Okay. I'm laughing about it just because I am embarrassed by it. But it's also just because, like, to look at the situation, it was so incredibly low key that this gigantic response was elicited for an accident where there was absolutely no damage. But of course I understand. And it's like, this woman telling me that she's had all these back surgeries, and she's worried about her back and her son's back and all that. She's within her rights. She's within her rights to get all that. But you could tell there was a paramedic who walked by me, and he looked at me and he just like rolled his eyes and said, "I'm really sorry about this." Right. And you just know that they see this every day. They see this, this over response, right, to these smaller traffic accidents. So, but yeah, the paramedics are with her. They're with her for about 5 minutes, and she doesn't get out of the car or anything. They check her over, and then they just leave. they walk back, and they just, I guess, go back to the fire station and continue playing ping pong or whatever they're doing. Or they go to more important calls, or who knows. And then it's just me, and it's the police officer, and it's the woman in the car. She doesn't get out of the car the entire time, which she doesn't have to. But yeah, he comes back and he takes her insurance, and then he comes and he takes mine, and he then asks me a couple of questions, and he's just like, tell me exactly what happened. So I told him what happened, and that's when he tells me that, yeah, this is a very common accident. Can I just ask you something? Like, how fast do you think you were going when you hit her? Right. And I said, I don't know, maybe 2, because, I was coming from like a complete stop. I mean, and I think the police officer knew, and I know, he's probably used to people in those situations downplaying the role that they played in the accident happening. But yeah, I think at that moment he knows I'm telling the truth, because like I think the damage tells it all. And he gives me a police report, and he's like, in a few days, like, call this number up, and it's like $15. And I ask him at that point, like, what is my responsibility here? Like, do I need to do anything unless the woman reacts? I mean, unless she files a claim herself. And he's like, I can't really tell you that. Just like, call up your insurance and tell them what happened. So he gives me the thing, and then he's on his way. And then I just see the woman pull out into traffic before he does. And then the police officer, pulls out, and then I pull out too. And then you would never know that the thing happened. You would never know. Like, usually you're driving down the road, that a bad accident happened here, right? Because you see shattered glass all over the concrete. You see, bumpers out in the middle of the road and on the median and things like that. And, man, like, what happened here? I would have loved to see that. But in this case, it was absolutely nothing except, like, time, I guess, which, as I said, is my religion. We spent a lot of time there doing this on a Sunday afternoon. Yeah, and the next morning I call up Alpha, and my insurance agent answers, and he's like, "Do you want to file a claim?" And I said, "Well, I don't think I can file a claim. Like, there's literally nothing to claim. There's no damage to my car whatsoever." And I told him, like, what is my responsibility here? What am I supposed to do? And he's like, well, basically just sit tight. And, if the woman contacts her insurance company and files a claim for, like, her back, or she goes to a doctor or anything like that, then we'll know, and then we'll call you. So now I'm just, waiting, and it's just one of those things where I'm not anxious about it. I'm not really paranoid about it, but it has come up in the back of my mind throughout the week. This idea that, like, one day I may not know the day, but I will get a call. And just from my insurance agent, Grant, right? And he'll tell me, the woman that you hit a year ago is now going to the doctor complaining of massive back pain. And, she thinks it may have something to do with, like, that time you hit her like a year ago. And it just, I don't know how they would be able to connect the two. Right. But that's these are nightmare stories that I've heard. And I'm not saying, like, I haven't been on Reddit all week long reading about these things. And I asked my insurance agent, and he hasn't really had many, like, occurrences of this kind of thing happening. But I do have a friend who did tell me that, right, like, he knew somebody who a couple of years ago was in a car accident that they caused. It was almost exactly like mine. It was just a very small, not even registering anywhere near the Richter scale of an accident. But nevertheless, a year later, like an actual year later, the person filed a claim, and the thing dragged on, and she kept on trying to sue the insurance company, and dragged it and, like, put it into court and everything. And eventually the court threw it out because they just couldn't. Obviously, it's like the woman could not prove that any of her neck pain had anything to do with this accident that happened over a year ago, right? Eventually it got thrown out. But I tell you what, that was 4 years later that it finally got thrown out. So that is truly something that I am very concerned about, right? Even though I do pay my insurance, and insurance does cover things like, you know, legal representation and bodily injury and all that stuff, it's still one of those things that it's like I have to deal with. I have to keep taking phone calls and worrying about it. And I don't have time for that. I really don't. And I started out saying that, like, I'm worried that I'm going to get extorted, right? And again, I want to put that karma out there into the universe that I don't believe in, that I have to give this woman, right, the benefit of the doubt, that she does have good intentions, right? And she has had all these back surgeries, as she's claimed, and she's worried about her son as well, even though she's in the Jeep, you know, hot boxing it up, smoking a cigarette with him in there. And you know, she genuinely, like, she's just doing her due diligence. She just wants to make sure that she's covered in the event that you know, I don't know, she gets some kind of, like, I don't know, back injury later on down the line. But I have to give her the benefit of the doubt in that case. But I also feel that if, like, a year goes by, you know, memories of me and, like, my face there on the side of the highway at Lakeshore Parkway here in Birmingham, Alabama will be jogged up, I think. I mean, she's welcome to sue me, all right? I got like $500 in the bank. Soon to have a little bit more because of that tax refund. She's welcome to take whatever she wants, right? I guess. Right. Yeah, I am. We are now 2 weeks and counting from me being unemployed. You know, as I've been talking about in recent weeks, the time is running down on my contract as an adjunct instructor at the university. Normally I have some kind of a work, you know, lined up for the summer. And yeah, like this summer I am teaching some summer camp and, you know, delivering food and doing other side hustles. But other than that, I'm really, things are starting to get a little bit scary, I suppose, on the job marketplace. I've been waiting to hear back on an interview. I actually got some rejections this week from some applications that I sent in via LinkedIn, which are disheartening to be sure, but at least you're hearing back about it. You're no longer thinking about it. That's good. See, that's what happened. Like back in the day when you would like file an application with an actual human being looking at it, they just wouldn't get back to you. But now with like AI, and automated headhunters, they do get back to you with an automated response saying that, like, sorry, you're not what we're looking for right now. So I am happy to get those rejections. That's kind of nice, right? Just to be like, okay, well, I can't count on that anymore. Nice, but yeah. But yeah, like 2 weeks away from being unemployed. I'm getting ready for it, right? Like, I'm not shaving or anything. Like, I'm wearing just my old ratty flannel around the house, right? With, like, you know, mustard stains on it from the last time I was unemployed, right? You know, I'm walking around the house doing chores, folding laundry, you know, ironing, like in that movie Mr. Mom, where he loses his job. That's like my entire knowledge of what it's like to be unemployed. Even though I've been unemployed at several times in my life, I just like revert to looking like, you know, Michael Keaton during these days. But yeah, just looking on LinkedIn, and again, just like, you know, going through all these scams, these scammy jobs. This week, actually, I found a few jobs that were not scammy, and I did apply to them. So, yeah, here's one. So I have like a job notification out there for any jobs that are like, you know, faculty or curriculum development, and you get some interesting ones. Here's one with a homeschool program called The Good and the Beautiful. I thought it was honestly like writing for a soap opera or something at one point, but it's a remote contract and 0 of 10 skills match. So I have all these skills on my LinkedIn and none of them match, but somehow for whatever reason they showed this job to me. But yeah, this is a The Good and the Beautiful, a homeschool curriculum publisher, seeks qualified applicants for the position of editor. 1099 contractor. You need a bachelor's degree in English, editing, education, or a closely related field. See, this is why LinkedIn sucks, because like, yeah, they still showed this job for me, but they're saying like 0 of 10 skills match. You know, I have on my LinkedIn profile that I English, editing, education, like all those are my skills, right? But I don't know, maybe LinkedIn just has some kind of like an atheist filter. Like it just knows you're an atheist or something, and you won't sign. You know, when you sign up with these like Christian schools, you have to like sign your name to like a statement of faith, right? Saying that you believe in God and all that. Which, you know, to that I basically say, right, like, you know, Ernie Hudson and Ghostbusters. Like if there's a steady paycheck, I'll believe anything you want me to. But you know, right? But I don't know, to a point. Proficiency with Adobe Acrobat. Yeah, like this is, you know, this is my job. The Good and the Beautiful. What a weird name, you know, like for a school. The Good and the Beautiful offers affordable homeschool resources of the highest quality, making homeschooling economical and accessible. Our open and go courses are simple to use for the student and the instructor, all while connecting children to the good and the beautiful in life and in learning. Yeah, so that's interesting. You know, where's your kid go? Oh, he goes to this the Good and the Beautiful. Right. You know, I never heard of that. Is that part of the Vestavia school system? You know, that's weird. See, this is where this is like what they talk about when they talk about school choice, right? Like how the states and the Department of Education is going to make more funding available to school choice. This is what they're talking about, right? They're going to be taking money away from like actual public schools, you know, that hire like things like, you know, frivolous things like certified teachers and all that. They're giving them to these just, you know, homeschool programs called the Good and the Beautiful that really do sound like just a right, like some kind of a daytime programming, right, on CBS. I don't know. Yeah, it's like getting off of that. I meant to talk about this last week, but I guess in a lot of ways I hadn't quite processed it yet. This is a big thing. Normally when I go into Google News, it's like turning on CBS News. You don't expect them to tell you anything informative at all. You know, it lives for the headline, but I was really surprised last week. I was looking on my phone just at Google News, and this hit me like a freaking ton of postmodern bricks. There's a new Thomas Pynchon book coming out. Yeah, Shadow Ticket. I thought it was like a joke at first. I looked at the date under the title of the article to make sure it wasn't April 1st. Yeah, Thomas Pynchon, one of my favorite authors and one I talk about quite a lot, has a new book out called Shadow Ticket. It doesn't have a cover yet. There's not a cover for it, but yeah, it's being released through Penguin Random House, and there is a description of it, which I'll read. So yeah, Thomas Pynchon, if you're not familiar with him, is you know, I suppose like one of the last of the living postmodern writers, like OG postmodern writers. I don't know what postmodernism is. I've been thinking about it all week long because every time a Thomas Pynchon book comes out, which isn't very often, or every time I read a Thomas Pynchon book, which is quite often, I'm saddled with thinking about what postmodernism is. You know, he's been writing books, you know, since the 1960s, and he's now 87 years old. So odds are, you know, his last book was in 2014. And this book, I think we were fully expecting him not to write another book. But he wrote one. He's 87 years old, so this may very well be his last one. Who knows? So we have to take it, I guess, seriously with reverence, because he is a great writer. But yeah, here's the this is a lot of people were speculating, was this written by Thomas Pynchon, and my bet is yes. I think he writes the summaries to all of his books, because they do not seem like summaries for books that are written by just like some kind of copy editor at a publishing firm. But yeah, it says Milwaukee, 1932, the Great Depression going full blast, repeal of prohibition just around the corner, Al Capone in the federal pen, the private investigation business shifting from labor management relations to the more domestic kind. Hicks McTaggart, a one-time strikebreaker turned private eye, thinks he's found job security until he gets sent out on what should be a routine case, locating and bringing back the heiress of a Wisconsin cheese fortune who's taken a mind to go wandering. Before he knows it, he's been shanghaied onto a transoceanic liner, ending up eventually in Hungary, where there's no shoreline, a language from some other planet, and enough pastry to see any cop well into retirement. And of course, no sign of the runaway heiress he's supposed to be chasing. By the time Hicks catches up with her, he will find himself also entangled with Nazis, Soviet agents, British counterspies, swing musicians, practitioners of the paranormal, outlaw motorcyclists, and the troubles that come with each of them, none of which Hicks is qualified, forget about being paid, to deal with. Surrounded by history he has no grasp on and can't see his way around in or out of, the only bright side for Hicks is it's the dawn of the big band era, and as it happens, he's a pretty good dancer. Whether this will be enough to allow him somehow to Lindy Hop his way back to Milwaukee and the normal world, which may no longer exist, is another question. There's Shadow Ticket by Thomas Pynchon. Yeah. Yeah, I think part of the mystique of Thomas Pynchon, of course, is that he is quite anonymous. We have a pretty good idea by now, like what he looks like from various like candid photos that have been taken over the years. But really the most famous picture of him was one that was taken when he was like, I think he was at like Cornell in like the 1950s as a student. And, now he's 87 years old. He lives in New York, and it's not like he is, he made a statement to CNN years ago when they did like a report on him. And they went out and filmed him. And he got really mad about this, and he sent them a letter that says, like, I think when people say that an author is anonymous, or it just is code for saying he just doesn't like to talk about his work, or he doesn't like to talk to reporters, right? And so he said, you can show the video of me, but I'll make a deal with you. You need to show like a montage of all these other people and just say like I'm one of them, right? So that's what they did. That's the deal that they struck. So. And, I think in a way he's got like a sense of humor a little bit about his anonymity. And I think in a way he's also a brilliant marketer, even though he, like a lot of postmodernists isn't interested in marketing and, advertising and all that, just letting the work speak for itself. I think he is very well aware of the fact that like one of the reasons he's had such staying power and has managed to penetrate the imagination of like, new generations of readers since the 1960s, is because like we are so used to this idea of like the author mystique of authors going on like chat shows and, being interviewed about their work, and we're just looking at them being like, I cannot believe this guy sat down at a desk and wrote a fucking book. Like I can't, that guy up there, like sat in a quiet room without anything going and told a story on paper and like it makes sense somewhat. And there's always been like this like amazing reverence that we've had for authors, because they just simply, right, like are able to finish something that they started. Right? That's what it is. So, but yeah, I'm looking forward to Shadow Ticket. I've never read a Thomas Pynchon book when it's come out. When I found out about Thomas Pynchon, was right around the time I think Bleeding Edge came out, and I had known about him a few years before that, just sort of hearing about him. But I think in 2014 the movie Inherent Vice came out, which is to this date the only movie that's been made that's been based on one of Thomas Pynchon's works. And of course there's another one coming out in September, a couple of weeks actually before Shadow Ticket. I don't know if this was coordinated or not, but yeah, One Battle After Another, made by the same filmmaker, Paul Thomas Anderson, will come out, which is based on his 1990 novel Vineland, right? So yeah, it's exciting. It's an exciting time to be a Thomas Pynchon fan. But yeah, as I said, there is a little bit of anxiety every time I sit down to read one of Pynchon's books, and because when you read a Thomas Pynchon book, it's not just like reading any other kind of novel. And there's a lot of writers like this, but specifically with Thomas Pynchon, the text is so dense and there's so many layers of meaning to it. And every single sentence, it's like watching a stand-up routine by Dennis Miller, right? Where he's just throwing you these obscure historical and like geopolitical references. And unlike watching something by Dennis Miller, it's entertaining, and you really do fall into rabbit holes of meaning and looking at like the Thomas Pynchon wiki and just like watching YouTube videos and just to unravel the text. And it is a lot of fun, right? To read a novel, even though it does make you work. It makes you work as a reader. You cannot read a Thomas Pynchon book passively at all in any stretch of the imagination. So, but yeah, like one of the things that I do think about every time I read a Thomas Pynchon book is, like what this idea of like, you know, postmodernism and like, what is it? Just like, what is, you know, what is this thing called postmodernism? And it's almost like, I don't know, like the 7 dirty words or something, you know, that George Carlin routine where it's like, you're not supposed to say what postmodernism is, but you've got to say it to know what it is, right? You know, I've never been able to get like a straight definition from anybody really about what postmodernism is and what its implications. And I've been able to get like fractures of definitions from like different lectures and like reading different stuff and like just, you know, professors telling me and like my university education as a graduate student, but just nobody really can seem to, pin it down into a single definable term. And I think in a lot of ways that's almost like the intention of, postmodernism, right? Because, to define it would almost be to contradict it in terms, right? Like the idea of postmodernism is really on the surface, like the best way I can kind of think about it and explain it is really that there is no objective reality. And we're all paranoid that we are, none of us really are perceiving things the same way, in some kind of a common way. And making it through life is constantly trying to synchronize your realities, and just the absolute impossibility of doing such a thing, right? And so, and not only that, but, you know, like adding to the confusion is that postmodernism also has many different meanings and different types of forms. You know, of course, what I'm talking about with Thomas Pynchon is the idea of, you know, like, what is postmodern literature, right? But obviously also there's like postmodern architecture. And I think that the two things do, like in the many forms of whatever you want to call postmodernism, do gel a little bit in the idea that like, postmodernism is all about, right, like acknowledging power structures and acknowledging these things that, dominate and oppress in a way. So when you think about like the most famous kind of, I guess, postmodern architecture, which is brutalism, it was a style of architecture, you know, that immigrated from like West Germany and Hungary in like the 1950s. And, you know, there was that movie that came out about it earlier this year called The Brutalist, which I saw. And, you know, when you look at brutalist architecture, it's completely stripped in many ways of like pretense and just like the ornaments of power. And it is very simply just like concrete and steel. And it's like just reducing the idea of what a structure is to its bare bones. Right. And in the idea that it's supposed to be this, you know, the idea of like a building, a structure is a place where people come in. And when you see like a lot of, in America, especially like in the 1960s and 70s, a lot of the organizations and institutions that began to adopt brutalism as their preeminent style were these places that were supposed to be accessible to like diverse multicultural communities, places like community centers, especially. Like in The Brutalist, like the guy builds a community center. That it's a 4-hour long movie about a guy who builds, you know, like a YMCA. But yeah, like university campuses that are supposed to be like for everybody, right? And like at my university, they just knocked down one of the great brutalist structures that they had there, which was incredibly ugly and nobody liked it. And like really, like architects despise, you know, brutalism because it does take the pretense out of architecture in a lot of ways. And they don't like that very much, but yeah, like, I mean, when you look at postmodern literature as well, postmodern literature is all about kind of defining these secret histories and, kind of showing the paranoia of the person in the modern world, in this modern world that is split up into different nations, and also different corporations. And, the average person really does not have a stake in or a say in anything that happens to them. They're constantly being controlled and and, you know, like oppressed. And like in postmodern literature, there's a lot of paranoia, you know, that goes with it. When you look at like the work of Thomas Pynchon, especially, like there's a lot of paranoia, you know, that is shown in postmodern literature and in the postmodern idea of like not being in control of your own story, of your own narrative, and the idea that you're always being manipulated by some kind of like a ruling class, right? And yeah, so you know, why I don't know. It's like every time I have to read a Thomas Pynchon novel, I get like wrapped up in this idea, because we're so used to reading stories and as you know, like, you know, good versus evil, or reading like the hero's journey. And then when you get to this point where like you're in high school and you like discover, you know, like Slaughterhouse-Five or something by like George Orwell, or in a way, or something by, you know, Thomas Pynchon, you suddenly see like there's no real good guy or bad guy. There's no single resolvable story. It's all just very chaotic and entropic, and the idea that the world is completely chaotic and like indefinable. And that's what postmodernism is. It's like if you try to define it, then you've lost automatically. And so that's why it can be, you know, so frustrating, right? But yeah, just like I've been thinking about this all week long. Again, this is like when Shadow Ticket was announced. I'm like, God, now I got to start thinking about this stuff again, because I can't help myself but think about it, because it is like a snake that's eating its own tail when you start to think about, you know, stuff like meta narratives and power structures and the really one of the ultimate questions of the time that we live in is like whether or not, you know, postmodernism is dead. If we've moved on from that, are we now in like a postmodernism world? And I've been trying to contextualize that this week, just really thinking about this. And like, again, just like watching some YouTube videos and lectures and listening to some podcasts while I've been out driving around, you know, serving people food, right? And just trying to think about this idea of, you know, what postmodernism shows is this way that we as human beings are constantly being like compelled, but again, by like these oppressive powers to connect two things or three things that don't really have anything whatsoever to do with each other. Like in Gravity's Rainbow, very classically, you know, the plot is that there's this American military colonel by the name of Tyrone Slothrop who keeps having sex. He's a ladies' man. He goes all over London and keeps having sex. And like wherever he has sex, like the V2, you know, rocket from the Germans falls. So every place he has sex, like a couple of days later, like it gets bombed, right? And so Tyrone Slothrop is like begins to be tracked by these mysterious government organizations, you know, trying to map two things that have nothing to do with each other. So he gets very Truman Showed and just like, you know, watched everywhere he goes and everything. So, you know, that's very much the idea that like the world is entropic and chaotic, but we're constantly being controlled, monitored, and surveilled by these organizations that are trying to keep us in order, that are trying to control us and keep us from, you know, recognizing each other as just like these individual particles that are floating through space that somehow have to try and, you know, like find a way to work with each other, to work together. So if this is right, making any sense whatsoever, I don't know. But yeah, but like, if you look at like postmodernism as some kind of like as an actual social force, not necessarily in architecture or literature, but like in a social force, it is interesting. It's like whatever this is, you know, came to be defined like in the 1960s and 70s and a little bit earlier than that. And, you know, what it is it really sprang out of this, you know, like the Marxist idea that eventually like things morphed into communism, right? And so this socialistic idea of people working together to build some kind of a society that functioned morally, right? Where people were just working for the sake of benefiting each other and benefiting the community, right? And so obviously America was very opposed to this, and, you know, capitalism, of course, was diametrically opposed to communism. And when communism began to prevail in Russia and obviously be taken over by the Soviet Union, you know, we really didn't know how bad the, you know, Stalin was, and like the actual torture of people who like were opposed to communism and things like that. All that stuff was going on completely, you know, not on the radio, not on the television. The only way we were really hearing about any of it was from like the CIA. But, you know, the CIA was like controlling this narrative. But then, you know, like in the Great Depression, that's when you suddenly had like all of these Americans beginning to like experiment and turn to communism because they had seen like capitalism fail. And so they were flirting with this idea of turning over, of turning red, right? They did not know that communism was ultimately a very failed experiment. They had no idea, no knowledge of this, right? So when Stalin dies and like Khrushchev comes to power, that's the first time that Americans in the 1950s really get this idea that communism is a very failed experiment. So with obviously like the Red Scare, with the HUAC committee, and with Khrushchev coming to power, suddenly people are thinking about communism in a totally different way. But so like, then suddenly you just have postmodernism as more or less like a new term prevail. Like postmodernism was like this new attempt by these, you know, like West German intellectuals coming in, immigrating to the United States, bringing these ideas with them and being like, yes, communism failed, but we can still think about some of the central tenets and the principles of what Marxism and now neo-Marxism is about, of like this idea of like building a community and things like that. So I think like postmodernism really did emerge from the rubble of the failed communist experiment as being more or less like a way to, you know, reconcile the central principles of that without all the torture and the killing and everything. A way to reconcile all of that with capitalism, with living in a capitalist world, and just being like, okay, so how can we think about the way that like we are oppressed, we are ruled, we're not necessarily in control of our own lives, but how do we like take these Marxist principles and like reconcile them with the world that we know that we have to live in, that we have to put up with, where we know that things are unfair and we know that things are unjust. How do we kind of reconcile those things and like, you know, build together like a moral society where we're good to each other, right? Because it's like, if you have to accept the fact that like there is no objective reality, and this world is just really full of just like random people running around with like different experiences and different perceptions of the world, we somehow find a way to work together, right? Like and those ways that we work together are not always very pure, that they're handed down to us by like the ruling class, the people who are like, you know, like the advertisers on Madison Avenue and the politicians in Washington, D.C. and in our state government and our local government. You know, they're lobbying, they're telling us like how to live our lives, what to buy, what measures to vote on, and things like that. And, you know, we are somehow working together by agreeing all to like the same lie, this same, you know, consumerist lie. So again, like a lot of like, that's where a lot of postmodern literature kicks in, is that it's like, you know, imagining these like scenarios where if, you know, knowledge is handed down to us and dictated to us by those people in power, then this is a bit of our way of taking it back, that we get to now build our own realities. We get to build our own knowledge and propagate that knowledge, not necessarily believe the things that we see on television or read in the newspaper. So, it coincides, right? The rise of postmodernism really does coincide with the more democratic forms of communication. You know, like you think about like in the 1970s, you get the propagation of newsletters from these various organizations, and you get the propagation in the 90s, of course, the internet, and now social media and what I'm doing, which is a podcast, where it's like the ultimate goal of, in a way, like, the postmodernists really did come true in the way that, like, there are increasingly less, or fewer gatekeepers, that everybody kind of gets a chance at their microphone to say their piece, and to hopefully get people to think, to believe what their reality actually is, right? And so now we find ourselves in 2025, and we see this moment where we all have this access to an audience to be able to, like, spread our information, our truths, or in many cases our lies, or to an audience that may believe one way or the other what's a truth and what's a lie, right? And so that's what brings us to today. Like, are we still living in, like, a postmodernist world? And if we aren't, then what the hell is what are we living in? What is our current state, our current our current reality? What is postmodernism? I don't know. The other, like, the best way that I ever really heard the postmodern condition described was the general malaise, the passivity that Gen X was often stereotyped by, and sometimes for, like, correct reasons, as being, cynical to any kind of power structure, to any kind of, being told what to do, right? And the writer David Foster Wallace, who wrote perhaps the most celebrated and most unread of the postmodern novels, Infinite Jest, said right before he died that postmodernism is dead. It can't sustain itself. Because the ultimate condition of being a postmodern person is to just be cynical, and you can't build a society that way. You can't build a society by just thinking that everybody else's idea is stupid or gay, right? So you have to do something else, right, with that, with those ideas, right? But and just to just to embrace it, but, like, again, Gen X was all about, like, not selling out. That was, like, the codified language of postmodernism, which is just to, like, not sell out, to just do, like, your own thing and do what makes you happy and be happy, and not be like the baby boomers who were, like, selling out, and just basically cosplaying rebellion by putting, like, Salt Life flip-flop bumper stickers on their Jeeps, and listening to Jimmy Buffett music while they cruise down the freeway in their Lexus on their way to their, like, corporate McJob. So that's, they didn't want any part of that, right? But now we are living in what I think you could possibly call, like, a postmodern world, right? We are living in a world now where, like, anybody on the internet is perfectly happy to sell out. That's it's like you sign up with Spotify, like I did this week. I had to sign up with Spotify because I can no longer host my podcast on Substack because it says I don't have a big enough following to host audio there. So, but I started hosting with Spotify, and Spotify just instantly gives me these benchmarks to hit. It's like as soon as 2,000 people listen to your podcast, you can begin advertising. And you go on YouTube and it's the same thing. It's like it gives you those benchmarks to hit. Postmodernism is like this age where it's like, we know that we're being ruled over and we want to be a part of it. We want to join that ruling class, right? And so we're constantly being given these carrots, right, to chase after, on the stick. And that's one thing I realized this week is like just how industrialized like podcasting has become. It has become this thing now where I was listening to driving around today. I was listening to Conan O'Brien's podcast, and like I listened to like a lot of podcasts, and today like Conan O'Brien's show came up. I was like, oh, that's kind of funny. It's like 30 minutes or so, and he doesn't just he does interview celebrities, but he's on there and he's just interviewing normal people. And I was like, that's kind of fun. And I always liked it on Conan's show back in the day when he would like just interview and go out on the street and do like bits where he was just talking to ordinary people, and he could be very funny with them. So I'll listen to Conan's show. And like Conan O'Brien, it has to be said, is one of the most, one of the richest men possibly in entertainment. Just had this like multi-million-dollar bailout from NBC to seed The Tonight Show to Jay Leno, and then he went to TBS for many years and made a lot of money there. And he is just hosted the Oscars. He's a very ubiquitous and very rich celebrity. And listening to Conan O'Brien's show, which is 30 minutes long, 15 minutes of it is him just selling something, right? And this is like every podcast you hear now, that it's just utterly the chance to market something. And it's fascinating to me that like, this is, like when television first started out, it was very commonplace. Television first started out in those years just before, Khrushchev came to power, and like the communism was exposed for the failed experiment that it really was. And, all of these, people were immigrating out of Germany and Russia and coming over here with their ideas. And they were like, let's call this postmodernism now. Let's not call it communism. Let's not call it Marxism. Let's just call it postmodernism, a way to reconcile whatever power structure we live within with our own moral ability to, to control our own lives and to be an individual. Right. So like television started just before all that happened. It was very commonplace back in the day, right? For people to turn on the TVs and like see Jack Parr, right, interrupt the Tonight Show to like, do an ad for Winston cigarettes, right? Just get up there and like smoke and tell you about how much he loves the cigarettes and all that. And, then throughout the 60s, 70s, 80s, and eventually, of course, the 90s, right, we get very cynical to that idea. We just want them to entertain us. And now they're like, turning us into like, consumers by like literally telling us something to buy. And we didn't like that very much. So we got rid of it, right? There's the Larry Sanders Show, the very first episode of the Larry Sanders Show is all about that, where it's like he's being asked to do a commercial for the Garden Weasel to interrupt his conversations with guests and his comedy monologue to do a hackneyed commercial and sell out. And he just doesn't want to sell out, right? Yeah, but now, like in 2025, we've gotten back to this point where we're totally okay with like comedians and our favorite celebrities interrupting their own shows, to sell us timeshares, or like, to sell us ancestry.com or something like that. It's just it's interesting, and I think you have to say that like postmodernism is possibly this thing where it's like, you can't define postmodernism. Forget about that. This is easy to define. This is easy to sell. Just like turn off all of that and just sit down and we'll sell this to you. And I think that's it's come full circle perhaps in a way. I think maybe, I don't know. Yeah, I was going to talk I was going to talk a little bit tonight about the men's movement of the 80s and 90s and the mythopoetics of Robert Bly and Michael Meade, but I think I'm going to save that for next week. That's a whole nother thing. Thank you so much for joining me here tonight on the Midnight Citizen Show. I'm your host, Mike Booty. Once again, you can find me over at mikesbonfire.substack.com. Also, Spotify, Apple Podcast. And yeah, as I said, I am hosting now over at Spotify because Substack, and it's so funny because I was just talking to Bob Lament, you know, on his show Static Radio a couple weeks ago about this. It's such a great platform. Substack lets you host for free. And, well, last week I was trying to upload my show to Substack, and I got a note from them because my show was an hour and a half long, and I got a note from them that said, like, hey, brother, uploading a show that's more than an hour long requires a lot of trust from your audience. You probably need to build up a bigger audience before you post here. It's basically telling Substack was telling me, like, stop freeloading. If you want to use our house, you got to bring some people into it, okay? So it's like, okay, I'll do that. Fine, yes, sir. So I can no longer host audio over there, but it's no big deal because I've been liking Spotify. It does allow me to track my metrics a little bit better, and so yeah, if you want to leave a comment, that would really help me build an audience so I can start hosting over at Substack again. Please tell your friends. That'd be nice. Leave a comment, tell your friends, subscribe to the show. I do a show every Saturday night over there at the Substack. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram. I don't really post there that often. I do post my show, so I'm there. If you're only on Instagram and no other kind of social media, that's a good place to find this show and link to it and all that. And yeah, if you're still listening, you're like hardcore. Thanks for staying up with me tonight. I don't know what you're drinking, what you're taking, but I'll see you next week. Keep your eyes open.